So my name is Heath Karesh. I'm with Treasury Wine Estates, and I'm one of the regional luxury sales managers for the company. Now that we're into the tasting aspect of this show here, I'd like to speak specifically to each of these vineyard sites and tell you some of the highlights of each and every one of them. So specifically, when we start with the very lowest in elevation, we're talking about the home vineyard. This is the original vineyard that the Beringer brothers planted in 1876. So this one sits at 150 feet above sea level, and it's basically 48 acres planted to vine. And as far as the climate in this vineyard, this sits on the valley floor once again, so it's much warmer, and basically you have the cool, moderate Pacific air that flows in just over the Mayacamas mountain range, which provides some nice gradual cooling in the afternoon and evenings. So this particular vineyard is also made up of a nice volcanic soil with an alluvial river rock base to it. So it's got a cobblestone river rock to it. So when we talk about the actual profile of this wine, we're talking about this inky, highly structured, finely knitted tannin wine that has deep flavors of black currant and hints of mint and cedar. So the second wine in our tasting today is the Chabot Vineyard, which also is in the St. Helena AVA. And again, we're still talking about a vineyard that sits pretty close to the valley floor. We're now talking about 240 feet above sea level and basically 31 acres planted to vine. So this particular vineyard is a sheltered valley floor in the early morning, so the sun exposure is in the late afternoon. We get some warm days, which really help to bring up those sugar levels. And again, we see some gradual cooling in the nighttime to help with the acids. So the Chabot Vineyard was the very first vineyard that the Beringer Private Reserve Cabernet consisted of, and as things have evolved, it now becomes just a small percentage. So in this vintage, it's 10% of the final blend. So the climate over in this particular vineyard sees shade in the morning and gets that beautiful afternoon sun that really helps to bring the sugars out. So it's a little protected in the early part of the day, but we certainly make up for it in the afternoon, and we obviously see those nice gradual cooling effects in the late afternoon and evening, which help to raise those acids in the wine. So the soil in this vineyard is a red volcanic clay soil with obsidian in there, and obsidian is a deposit left from the volcanoes, and it's like glass that's been carbonized, and it really holds the heat in from the sun baking all day, and we find that we have a much more gradual cooling effect in the evening as the obsidian releases the heat throughout the evening. So the third wine that we're going to taste now, we're going to take a little trip in the valley. We're moving over to Howell Mountain, and this is called the Pauley Vineyard. And unique about Pauley Vineyard is now we're talking about an elevation that sits at around 1,700 feet above sea level. Now we're talking about a vineyard site that's above the fog line, and we're now talking about a very long extended growing season. Of course, you know the longer extended growing season means that we pick up all kind of complexities and nuances that you can't develop in wines that don't have that long extended growing season. So the rocky soils and the steep grade, along with the southeastern facing exposure, all translate to the fruit's dense concentration and ample structure that we love in this vineyard. Again, this wine is a range of different Cabernet clones, providing an additional layer of complexity to the wine. And this particular vineyard makes up 5% of the actual blend in the 2016. And last but not least, in this profile, you find luscious fruit core with the dark plum, mission fig, and black cherry components. The wine has density, but still reflects those velvety tannins that we all know and love in this wine. Moving along in our component tasting, one of my favorite vineyards is the Steinhauer Ranch. And this is a vineyard that Beringer has been using for over 40 years. It's a longtime vineyard named after the vineyard manager Bob Steinhauer, and this makes up 40% of the blend. And when you think about it, Howell Mountain is the main component in this wine and makes up a full 60% of the final blend. and you think about the power and the elegance that come out of the Howell Mountain Vineyards. But Steinhauer Ranch sits at 1,800 feet above sea level. So once again, we're talking about being above the fog line. We do see plenty of sun and moderate temperatures in the early part of the morning. Once again, this is above the fog line, and we do see those moderate temperatures throughout the day. And we do have a long growing season. That extended growing season, again, makes this vineyard so special to Beringer and this particular wine. The profile of this wine is most robust. You see tannins that are very firm with an earthy finish. This is an exceptional display of the Howell Mountain fruit with a nice kiss of that cedar that it gets. So moving along in our component tasting here is one of my favorite vineyards as well, and that's the Bancroft Ranch. This is a particular vineyard that Beringer has been farming since the early 1980s, and we've got a lot of history in this particular vineyard. So this particular vineyard is one of those, again, that sits at 1,800 feet above sea level. Again, we're talking about being above that fog line, having that very long extended growing season and maceration period where those grapes have a lot of time to develop and create all these complexities to them. So the soil consists of this white volcanic tufa, which is a beautiful condition up there. The profile of this wine, the concentration is rich with robust tannins. You see these black currant and cherry flavors that come screaming through. So now we're going to take a look at this vineyard that's been added in the 2016 vintage, and this is coming from the Oakville AVA, or American Viticultural Area, and it's called the Gamble Vineyard, otherwise known as Gamble Ranch. So we often don't talk about this particular wine because the Gamble family does make their own wine. But of course, this is the company Procter & Gamble, the Gamble family of Procter & Gamble, and this is their vineyard. And we've got a very special relationship with Beringer and the Gambles, and we are using a good percentage, 15% of the fruit actually goes into making this wine. This is a very special vineyard for us at Beringer that we're using. So this particular vineyard actually sits on the valley floor, and it's about 154 feet above sea level. So it does get those bright sugars and nice soft velvety tannins to them. And again, you got to think about how each one of these components acts into the final blend. And last but not least, our 7th vineyard site in this component tasting, the final piece that makes up the Beringer Private Reserve Cabernet, Lampiride Vineyard, which is located in the Mount Veeder AVA. Now this is the vineyard that's the highest elevation in the Napa Valley, sitting at 2,400 feet above sea level, obviously well above the fog line, and you get these really small berries that come out of that Mount Veeder site. The intensity and the texture of these grapes are definitely the gripping tannins that we're looking for to give the longevity in this wine. This vineyard produces a textured, full-bodied, and fresh style wine, and it has a rocky ash soil that really limits the yield in this particular vineyard. So small yield, but highly concentrated with layers of black fruit and earth. As I mentioned, this is the highest vineyard in the Napa Valley, and this actually makes up 5% of the final blend in the 2016 Beringer Private Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon.